Ramon Foster, Kayla Anderson, Will Bowling with you on a day where the Titans reportedly are interviewing two candidates for their general manager job. We talk Titans with the voice of the Titans, Mike Keith, presented as always by our friends at Farm Bureau Health Plans. Need great healthcare coverage with an affordable price tag? Let Farm Bureau Health Plans coach you through it. They've been protecting Tennesseans for 75 years. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning.
Mike, I want to start with Mike Vrabel's end-of-year comments in his press conference earlier this week. What did you make of his comments on the speed of the team, the health moving forward, and the next step this team has to take in what is shaping up to be one of the most fascinating off seasons in team history?
The word I would use, Will, would be consequential off seasons. I don't think that's an overstatement. Because I think at this point you're at a moment where you're going to have to make some changes. You understand the changes are coming to the football team, and we've been at these moments before. I've seen these in particular with Coach Jeff Fisher, where he's made comments at the end of the season, we got to get faster. And so then that became something that was an off-season priority, not only on offense and in the secondary, but at other spots. We've seen it at linebacker and places where you can add people who can really run. I start there because I felt like this team's lack of speed showed greatly in certain games later in the season. The December 11th game with Jacksonville, the Titans clearly had speed issues keeping up with the Jaguars. Now, it was much better last weekend because some guys were back. And so you saw what the Titans can be. But I think they want to be a faster football team. I think they want to convert to being that team that has the ability to make a lot of plays with speed, that has the chance to make some turnovers, or takeaways probably is the better word, but also can make some big plays offensively with speed. The injury thing, too, I think he's delivering a message to players, in particular about the soft tissue injuries, that you better be training for this, and that there's going to be a level of expectation that, we're going to need you to be more ready to go in 2023 in those areas. Some of the injuries can't be avoided. We get that. Mm-hmm. You don't have a knee injury that occurs because of a lack of training. And there's not something you can do to prepare for an ACL. I mean, you could be in good shape. I mean, that obviously helps. But it was strong. I mean, I thought the messages from top to bottom were very, very strong from Vrabel.
And Mike, talking about the defining moment for the Titans this offseason, it's incredible that Houston and Indianapolis are going through similarly significant offseasons in their own right. And when you think about how other teams reacted to Derrick Henry and the Titans' physical run game, Indianapolis got bigger and better up front. Teams started equipping themselves to beat this version of the Titans. How much do you feel like this organization is going to have to look at the other off seasons the rest of the AFC South is having, look at what Jacksonville did last offseason, kind of be aware of their surroundings a little bit in determining what the plan is for this offseason?
I think it's a great question, and I think absolutely none. The truth is, I think for where the Titans are, we're not where Houston is, and we're not where Indianapolis is right now, right. Fortunately. I think the Titans need to just worry about the Titans, to be the best version of themselves. Now, if you're going to come back and you're going to pound the football like what you've done before, great. But remember, the difference in this offense was not just Derrick Henry, it was the deep shots off play action. Remember the throws to Khalif Raymond in 2019?
Yep.
Remember the plays that they were able to make down the field? Because what this offense became, even when it was successful, is they had to drive the ball and drive the ball and drive the ball. You're not going to score points doing that in the NFL. And that's what they realize is you could still be who you are and still be who you want to be, but there has to be that second part of it. And on defense, the Titans' defense works. There's nothing wrong with their scheme or or anything like that. They've just got to be able to make some more plays in different areas. Would have been interesting to see a whole year with David Long and Zach Cunningham at linebacker healthy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did we ever see that for more than a half?
Nope.
I mean, so I don't think they're on the wrong track, and that's why, Will, why I think the question is so good that you're asking me. But I think the Titans are in a different position than maybe Houston would have been, or Jacksonville would have been, or Indy would have been talking about us. I think we're further along and are in a position that there are things that we can do to make ourselves better where we don't have to fundamentally change based on what everybody else is doing. Hey, listen, Jacksonville may be good for a while, right?
Right.
I mean, but if we're doing what we do, we can compete with them, no doubt.
Mike, that's interesting, too, because, excuse me, the presser that Coach Vrabel had was so open. I don't think I've ever seen him be this open, and the speed thing is what everybody spoke of for the most part. With that, how do you get to a point to where you say we're getting faster without having to do so much in the offseason to where it's just so many different moving bodies on a team like the Titans?
You know, it's really funny, Ramon, because, and we talked about this the other night on the Vrabel show, when you talk about turning over the roster, and usually a roster turnover is a quarter to a third of the roster.
Yeah.
But which quarter to third of it is it with this team? Because they played 86 players. I mean, who at the end of the season, it's hard to remember who was actually on the roster at the first of the season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think they found a few guys. I mean, clearly, you know, the Titans played the 5th most rookie snaps of any team in the NFL. Number 5, over 3,700 rookie snaps. Houston was number 1 at 4,800. So, I mean, listen, they found some guys that can play. McCrary can play. Obviously, Burks can play. Petit Frere can play. Okonkwo can play. Hassan Haskins can play certainly a role. I mean, you found some guys. Jack Gibbons, I think, you know, has a role on the team somewhere going into camp that he'll have to win again, but he's proven he could be one of the 53. So when you start from there and back up to, okay, here's who we expected to have,
Right.
then you say, all right, this is how we take this apart. But I think this is going to come from a psychology, not psychology, but a different standpoint with the new GM in terms of how they value positions.
Right.
You're going to take all the pieces and you're going to spread the puzzle out. And then you're going to sit and say, okay, we believe this piece is worth this going forward. This is how we reset the board. And this is how we look at things differently. This is how we evaluate someone who's coming off an injury. This is how we evaluate a position in terms of its value, but in terms of not only that, what we need in terms of the speed of this position or the depth of this position.
Right.
It's going to be, like I said, it's consequential this offseason because you're at a point where you've just come off a 7-10 and the world hasn't ended. And yet it's clear that this team is going to have to change its direction some to get back to where it wants to be.
And it's almost like you read my mind because that's where I was going to next, Mike, as you were speaking about that direction. And this offseason early on, you got rid of 2 big pieces. One, offensively, your coordinator. That's a huge piece because a lot can change. But also, you got rid of a guy that held the room of the biggest pieces on the team, meaning there may be 5 wide receivers on the field, but not all the time. But you always have 5 offensive linemen on this field at all time. That's a major adjustment moving forward, Mike. How do you see these pieces kind of coming together in 2023 to where you see a difference? Where do you want to see a difference in either play calling or offensive style of play in the offensive line?
Okay, so let's break this down into what's really important, Ramon, and that is, and I'm not saying this for your benefit, and I'm not saying this to the detriment of other position coaches, but on an NFL team, the offensive line coach might be the most important position coach there is.
Yeah.
because the offensive line coach ties more into the offensive coordinator. And in some cases, we see offensive line coaches become offensive coordinators because they have the whole tie into what your philosophy is going to be.
Right.
Because they understand what you're going to do run-wise, and they understand what you're going to do pass-wise. I will be interested to see, will the new offensive line coach be tied to the offensive coordinator hire? Will they come as a pair? Because there are so many things from a scheme standpoint and from a teaching standpoint that factor into the two areas. I mean, the offensive line, everybody will go nuts about the offensive coordinator hire, positively or negatively, whatever it is, right? Because that's the big name. The one I'm most interested to see is the offensive line hire, because there's such a philosophy behind that, much like the secondary hire.
Yes.
Yep.
There's a philosophy hire behind that, because, as you say, there are always five offensive linemen on the field. There are always 4, or in most cases 5 defensive backs on the field now. So, I mean, the moves on Monday, the Todd Downing move is the one that got the most attention, but the two that got my attention the most, because I think the Downing thing felt inevitable after the year they had had. But choosing to change Keith Carter, who'd been with Vrabel since he became the head coach, and choosing to make a move in the secondary. Anthony Midget is a guy that he had known since his Houston days. It shows you're doing something very significantly from not only a scheme standpoint, but a teaching standpoint at both spots.
Yep.
So, Big Jeffrey Simmons, just a special player. And I know that there is talk of getting this deal done, a new deal done with him. He even said he'd like to get it done in a timely manner. How big is this for this team to keep a cornerstone player here like that?
You just don't find guys like that. That's the thing, is you say that all the time about players at various positions. You know, you say, oh, you just don't find a receiver like that, or you don't find a back like that. You don't find defensive tackles like him. You know, we've had a couple in the instance that we've been the Titans. Albert Haynesworth was the other one. But they don't grow on trees. And the thing about Jeff that's so important is teams have to scheme him no matter what, whether he's playing on a bad ankle or what. He's going to give you 80% of the snaps, which is incredible, especially for what he went through this year. He fits any philosophy, and there are going to be some changes this year, obviously, because of the changes we've discussed. But this guy, he is what he needs to be for this team every single day. And he's what Vrabel wants. He's big, he's tough, he's aggressive. He can rush the passer and play the run. Jeffrey Simmons is a cornerstone piece. Mm-hmm. And so I think any discussion that you're going to have for what goes forward with the future is going to involve him. I don't think there's any question about it. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouths, but I just think it's safe to say that he's a guy on the page that you say, okay, here's a check mark, here's a star, whatever you want it to be. We're gonna get him taken care of because he's part of our long-term future. Kayla, he's a championship player.
Yeah.
Anywhere he is, he's a championship player. And you just don't find you find good players, you find great players, you find special guys. This is one of those guys who's a championship player, and those are hard to find.
There are several players that won't be back in the two-tone blue this next season. We don't know who they are yet, but if you were going to bring back one of these guys that's a free agent, who do you think's important?
Who's a free agent or who's under I have to think who the free agents are.
I think even Autry.
Well, he's under contract.
Yeah.
And see, that's the challenge when you ask about that, because you've got a bunch of guys that you have to make decisions about who are under contract. The free agents are like Long and Davis and, players, Hooper, players like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think you've got to see how it all fits together. And again, the offensive line hire is going to be a big deal.
Okay.
You're in a better position than you were this time a year ago because you've got at least one answer at tight end in Okonkwo, who you got in the fourth round. I mean, Chig is going to be a part of what this offense does going forward. I think the difficulty in having these discussions, and as I read some of the things in different places about, hey, you should sign this guy or trade for this guy or whatever, but they're all going to be pieces that build on top of one another based first on making sure the cap situation is straight and then built secondly on philosophy going forward.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different ways that you could do this, but I mean, Autry, for example, Autry could still really, really play.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But can you afford him? That's the question, because you've got to, when you think about can you afford him, it's not just about the dollars, it's about the availability, it's about the scheme you're going to run, how many plays do you need from him, who can you draft at certain spots, because the thing that you can't do is you can't be in a position where you have so much money tied up at one spot, lose that player, and then go from a $14 million player to a minimum salary player.
Yeah.
We saw that last year. And when that happens, it's catastrophic because you can't replace the $14 million. And that's what they're going to try to do, I think, staggering this roster as best they can to not only be as good up front, but to build depth.
Voice of the Titans, Mike Keith, our guest this morning on Ramon, Kayla, and Will, presented as always by Farm Bureau Health Plans. Look to the folks at Farm Bureau Health Plans when you need someone who knows the health coverage game plan. They've been protecting Tennesseans for 75 years. Mike, thanks for the time as always.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, there's voice of the Titans, Mike Keith, joining us.